In a Las Vegas penthouse suite, a man lay dead with a gun in his hand and a farewell note beside him. Everything pointed to suicide, until a forensic investigator discovered a single microscopic fiber that would change everything. This is the story of Marcus Whitfield, a master of psychological manipulation who controlled minds like chess pieces, but made one fatal mistake. He underestimated someone who knew his tricks. Prepare to enter the mind of a manipulator who, even in death, left behind a deadly game of cat and mouse.
The rising Las Vegas sun painted the sky a deep orange as sirens cut through the morning silence of the Strip. On the 47th floor of the Bellagio, a penthouse suite that cost more per night than many earn in a month had become a crime scene. Marcus Whitfield's body lay fallen beside an Italian leather armchair, a .38 pistol still firmly gripped in his right hand. Blood had spread across the Persian rug, creating a macabre contrast with the golden tones of the luxurious decor. On the coffee table, a handwritten note on hotel letterhead read simply, "I can no longer live with the weight of my debts. Forgive me." Detective Raymond Torres observed the scene with the weary expression of someone who had seen too much. At 52, his weathered face and graying mustache told the story of 3 decades fighting crime in a city that never slept. He'd arrived at the Bellagio 20 minutes ago, called in by hotel security after a maid discovered the body during her morning rounds. "Classic case," Torres muttered to his partner, Detective Lisa Martinez, as she photographed the scene. Gambling debts, desperation, and a man who couldn't face the consequences of his choices. The suite itself was a testament to excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Strip, where neon signs flickered weakly in the early morning light. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured rainbows across marble surfaces, while original artwork adorned the walls. It was the kind of place where dreams came to die, wrapped in silk and gold. Hotel security had cordoned off the area, but Torres knew this wouldn't take long to wrap up. The evidence was straightforward. A successful psychologist who'd gambled away his practice, his savings, and ultimately his will to live. The casino's records showed Marcus had lost over $300,000 in the past month alone, playing high-stakes poker with the kind of reckless abandon that only came from true desperation. But as Torres prepared to call it in as a suicide, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Sophia Hartwell stepped out, her crime scene kit in hand, and her sharp eyes already scanning the hallway. At 38, she was one of the most respected crime scene analysts in Las Vegas, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her uncanny ability to see what others missed. "Morning, Torres," she said, her voice carrying a subtle authority that made seasoned detectives listen. "What do we have?" "Textbook suicide," Torres replied, gesturing toward the open suite door. "Dr. Marcus Whitfield, 45 years old, practicing psychologist, shot himself in the head sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. according to the medical examiner's preliminary assessment." Sophia entered the suite, her trained eyes immediately cataloging every detail, the placement of the body, the angle of the gun, the spread of blood. She absorbed it all in seconds, but something made her pause, something that nagged at her professional instincts like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. "Has anyone moved the body?" she asked, kneeling beside Marcus's remains. "Not since we arrived," Torres confirmed. "Hotel security found him exactly like this." Sophia studied the scene with the intensity of a master chess player contemplating her next move. The gun was positioned correctly for a self-inflicted wound, the angle seemed right, and the blood spatter pattern appeared consistent with suicide. But her years of experience had taught her that sometimes the most obvious answer was designed to hide the truth. She noticed the way Marcus's fingers curled around the weapon. Natural, but perhaps too natural. The absence of any defensive wounds or signs of struggle seemed almost staged. Most telling was the complete lack of hesitation marks or false starts that typically accompanied suicides by firearm. "Tell me about his background," Sophia said, photographing the scene from multiple angles. Torres flipped through his notes. "Dr. Marcus Whitfield, respected psychologist with a practice in Henderson, specialized in behavioral modification and addiction therapy. According to his colleagues, he'd been struggling with gambling addiction for the past year. His practice was hemorrhaging money, and he'd been seen at various casinos around town, playing increasingly desperate stakes." As Sophia continued her examination, the Las Vegas morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the crime scene. The city below was waking up, unaware that high above them, A mystery was beginning to unfold that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the human mind's capacity for manipulation and deception. But Sophia Hartwell had built her reputation on questioning the obvious, and as she stood in that luxurious suite, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and desperation, she knew that Marcus Whitfield's story was far from over. She asked, her voice measured and professional. Detective Torres gestured broadly at the scene. "Come on, Sophia." Gun in hand, suicide note, massive gambling debts. The man lost everything and couldn't face the music. It's Vegas 101. But Sophia had learned long ago that in her line of work, the most dangerous assumption was the obvious one. She photographed the weapon from multiple angles, noting the way Marcus's fingers wrapped around the grip. Something about the positioning bothered her. It was too perfect, too staged, like a director had positioned an actor's hand for maximum dramatic effect. "The blood spatter pattern," she murmured, more to herself than to Torres. "Look at this." She pointed to tiny droplets of blood on the marble floor near the coffee table, approximately 6 feet from where the body lay. If Marcus shot himself while seated or standing near that chair, this pattern doesn't match the trajectory. Torres approached, squinting at the evidence. Maybe he moved after the shot? People don't always drop immediately. Not with a head wound of this caliber, Sophia countered, her voice gaining intensity. The bullet entered just above the right temple at close range. This would have caused immediate incapacitation. He wouldn't have had time to move 6 feet and then collapse where we found him. She continued her methodical examination, each detail building a picture that diverged from the obvious narrative. The suicide note, written in what appeared to be Marcus's handwriting, was too neat, too composed for someone in the throes of despair. Most genuine suicide notes showed signs of emotional distress, shaky handwriting, crossed out words, tear stain. This one read like a polite resignation letter. "Detective Torres, I need you to contact the hotel's head of security," Sophia said, her attention focused on a small area of the Persian rug. "I want to know exactly who had access to this suite in the past 48 hours. Sophia, you're overthinking this. Sometimes a suicide is just a suicide." She looked up at him with the patient expression of someone who had heard this argument countless times. "And sometimes, a perfectly staged suicide is the sign of a very smart killer." Using her portable UV light, Sophia began scanning the area around the body. Under the artificial illumination, new details emerged that were invisible to the naked eye. Fabric fibers that didn't match anything in the room, footprint traces that had been partially cleaned, and most intriguingly, a small droplet of what appeared to be a cleaning solution near the balcony door. "Someone cleaned this scene," she announced, her voice carrying a note of triumph. "Look at this." She directed Torres's attention to an area of the marble floor that appeared spotless to the naked eye, but showed clear signs of recent cleaning under UV light. "This is industrial-grade cleaning solution, not the kind of products hotel housekeeping would use." Someone wanted to eliminate trace evidence. Torres's skepticism began to waver as Sophia's evidence mounted. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Dr. Marcus Whitfield was murdered by someone who understood crime scene investigation well enough to stage a convincing suicide." She stood up, her mind already racing through the implications. But they made one critical mistake. Using her tweezers, Sophia carefully extracted a single fiber from the carpet near the balcony door. Under her magnifying glass, it appeared to be synthetic, with a distinctive weave pattern that definitely didn't match any fabric in the suite. "This fiber," she said, holding it up to the light, "is from a specific type of material. It's not from his clothes, not from the furniture, and not from any of the hotel's textile. Someone else was in this room, someone who was careful enough to clean up after themselves, but not quite careful enough to account for everything." Detective Martinez, who had been quietly documenting the scene, looked up from her camera. "So if this wasn't suicide, who would want Marcus Whitfield dead?" Sophia carefully placed the fiber in an evidence bag, sealing it with the methodical precision that had made her one of the most trusted forensic analysts in Nevada. "That's what we're going to find out. But first, I need to understand who Marcus really was." She walked to the suite's desk, where Marcus's personal effects had been neatly arranged. His wallet, phone, and appointment painted the picture of a man living a double life. The appointment book showed regular meetings with casino executives, wealthy individuals, and what appeared to be group therapy sessions. But the times and locations seemed unusual for traditional psychology practice. "Torres, I want you to run a complete background check on Marcus Whitfield, not just the surface stuff. I want to know about his clients, his methods, his financial situation, everything." She paused, studying the appointment book more carefully. "And I want to know why a psychologist was meeting with casino security chiefs at 2 a.m. As the morning sun climbed higher over Las Vegas, casting the crime scene in, Sophia felt the familiar thrill of a complex case. The evidence was telling that Marcus Whitfield was far more than a gambling-addicted psychopath, and his death was far complicated than a simple suicide. But as she prepared to leave the scene, Sophia caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. In the corner of Marcus's appointment book, written in small, precise handwriting, was a note that simply read, SH, the one who sees what others miss. Her own initials, describing her exactly as she would describe herself. The Henderson Police Department's conference room buzzed with the quiet intensity of a complex investigation taking shape. Sophia Hartwell spread Marcus Whitfield's files across the long table, while Detective Torres worked the phones, digging into the psychologist's background. What they were discovering painted a picture far more sinister than anyone had initially imagined. Sophia, you need to hear this, Torres said, hanging up from his third call of the morning. Marcus Whitfield wasn't just any psychologist. He specialized in something called behavioral modification through psychological leverage. His colleagues describe him as brilliant but ethically questionable. Sophia looked up from a financial document that showed Marcus had actually been making substantial deposits into his accounts, not withdrawals for gambling losses as they'd initially believed. Define ethically questionable. According to Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the Nevada Psychological Association, Marcus had been under investigation for using unconventional methods with his clients. Apparently, he believed that traditional therapy was too slow and that people needed to be motivated through psychological pressure. The revelation hit Sophia like a puzzle piece clicking into place. He wasn't treating patients, he was learning how to control them. Their first interview was scheduled with Helena Vasquez, the casino manager at the Bellagio, who had worked closely with Marcus. Helena arrived at the station wearing an expensive business suit that couldn't quite hide the nervous tension radiating from her every movement. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her makeup had been applied with the precision of someone preparing for battle. Ms. Vasquez, Sophia began, her voice professional but probing. How long had you known Dr. Whitfield? Helena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass Torres had provided. About 2 years. He consulted for us on problem gambling cases. Consulted how exactly? Torres interjected. The casino manager's composure cracked slightly. Marcus had this way of reading people. He could look at someone for 5 minutes and tell you their deepest fears, their hidden shames, what made them tick. The casino executives thought he was a miracle. Sophia leaned forward, her instincts sharpening. And what did you think? I thought he was dangerous, Helena whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus didn't help problem gamblers overcome their addiction. He found ways to make them more dependent, more controllable. He called it therapeutic intervention, but what he really did was turn people into puppets. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Helena's revelation opened a door into Marcus's true nature that neither detective had anticipated. Can you give us a specific example? Sophia asked. Helena's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. There was this businessman from Phoenix, Robert Chen. He'd come to Vegas once a month, lose maybe 5 or 10,000, then go home. Normal high roller behavior. But after Marcus started counseling him, Robert began coming every week. He'd sit at the same poker table, play the same stakes, and lose everything he brought. What did Marcus do to him? Marcus learned that Robert's father had abandoned the family when Robert was 12, so he started positioning himself as a father figure, offering approval when Robert played correctly, and disappointment when he didn't. Within 3 months, Robert was coming to Vegas not to gamble, but to seek Marcus's approval. The gambling was just the price of admission. Torres exchanged a glance with Sophia. Where is Robert Chen now? Helena's face went pale. Suicide. 6 months ago. His family lost everything. The weight of Helena's words settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Marcus Whitfield wasn't just ethically questionable. He was a predator who used his psychological training to destroy lives systematically. Ms. Vasquez, Sophia said carefully, did Marcus ever use these techniques on you? Helena's composure finally shattered. He knew about my gambling problem, not the casino's money, my own money. I'd been hiding it for years, playing online poker to cope with stress. Marcus found out somehow, and he started managing my schedule so I'd work double shifts, increasing my stress level. Then he'd casually mention online poker sites during our meetings, always with this knowing smile. He was deliberately triggering your addiction. Worse than that, he was controlling when I felt stress and when I felt relief. I became dependent on our conversations, on his approval. If Marcus thought I was handling my gambling well, I felt in control. If he seemed disappointed, I'd spiral. Torres scribbled notes furiously. Did he ask for anything in return? Information. He wanted to know about high-roller clients, their personal details, their psychological profiles. He said it was to help them, but now I realize he was building files on potential targets. Sophia felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a disturbing picture. How many people would you estimate Marcus was manipulating this way? Helena thought for a moment, her expression growing more horrified as the implications sank in. At the Bellagio alone, maybe 15 or 20 regular clients, but he consulted for other casinos too. The Venetian, Caesar's Palace, MGM Grand. If he was doing this everywhere, we could be looking at dozens of victims, Sophia. The interview continued for another hour, with Helena providing names, dates, and detailed accounts of Marcus's manipulation technique. By the time she left, both detectives understood they were dealing with something unprecedented. A psychologist who had weaponized his training to create a network of psychologically dependent victims. Sophia, Torres said, as they reviewed notes. If Marcus was controlling this many people, any one of them could have snapped and killed him. But Sophia was thinking about something else. The note in Marcus's appointment book that had referenced her specifically. Torres, what if Marcus's murder wasn't revenge? What if it was self-defense? What do you mean? Think about it. Someone with Marcus's skills would never allow himself to be vulnerable unless he'd encountered someone who understood his methods well enough to use them against him. She stared at the evidence board they'd begun constructing. What if the killer wasn't one of his victims, but someone who was just as skilled at psychological manipulation as Marcus himself? As the Las Vegas afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows, Sophia realized they weren't just hunting a murderer, they were tracking a psychological predator who had finally met their match. The investigation room at Henderson Police Department had transformed into a war room. Photos, documents, and psychological profiles covered every available surface as Sophia Hartwell and Detective Torres prepared to interview their primary suspect. Each person on their list had motive, opportunity, and a connection to Marcus Whitfield's web of manipulation. Benjamin Park arrived first, his security uniform crisp despite the obvious stress etched across his weathered face. At 48, he carried himself with the disciplined posture of someone with military background, but his eyes betrayed a man living under constant pressure. Mr. Park, Sophia began, as head of security at the Bellagio, you worked closely with Dr. Whitfield. Can you describe that relation? Benjamin's jaw tightened perceptibly. Marcus wasn't just a consultant. He had a way of getting inside your head, making you think he was helping when really he was collecting ammunition. Torres leaned forward. Ammunition for what? Control, Benjamin said, simply. Marcus knew things about me that I'd never told anyone. Personal thing, family thing. Sophia studied Benjamin's body language, the way his hands clenched and unclenched, the slight tremor in his voice when he mentioned family. What kind of things? Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible. Finally he spoke. My daughter Emma is 16. She's been struggling with an eating disorder for 2 years. My wife and I have been fighting about treatment. Options, about whether to hospitalize her or try outpatient therapy. It's tearing our family apart. How did Marcus know about this? That's the thing. I never told him, but somehow he knew. He'd make casual comments about teenage psychology, about the pressures young girls face. He'd recommend restaurants that served healthy portions when we'd grab coffee. Small things that let me know he was watching, that he knew my weakness. Sophia felt the familiar chill of recognizing a predator's method. What did he want in return? Benjamin's composure cracked. Access to security footage, guest information. He wanted to know who was staying in which rooms, who was meeting with whom. He said it was for research, but now I realize he was stalking potential victims. Did you give him what he wanted? I had to, Benjamin whispered. He started sending me articles about teenage suicide rates, about families destroyed by eating disorders. He never threatened, directly, but the message was clear. Cooperate or watch your family fall apart. Torres made notes while Sophia processed the psychological torture Marcus had inflicted. Where were you the night Marcus died? Home with my family. We had a crisis with Emma. She'd collapsed at school. We were at the hospital until 3 a.m. We'll need to verify that, Torres said. Please do. And detective, I need you to know. I hated Marcus Whitfield, but I didn't kill him. I was too afraid of what he might do to my family if something happened to him. After Benjamin left, Sophia and Torres prepared for their next interview. Dr. Adrian Cross arrived precisely on time, his appearance immaculate despite the circumstance. At 52, he projected the calm authority of a successful psychiatrist. But Sophia detected something calculated behind his professional demeanor. Dr. Cross, Sophia. You knew Marcus Whitfield professionally. What was your assessment of his method? Adrian smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Marcus was brilliant, but unethical. He perverted everything psychology stands for, turning healing techniques into instruments of control. That sounds like a professional rivalry, Torres. Hardly rivalry. I reported Marcus to the state board multiple times. He was a disgrace to our profession. Adrian's voice carried barely contained anger. Do you know what it's like to spend 20 years building a reputation for ethical practice, only to have someone like Marcus make people suspicious of all psychologists? Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying Adrian's micro-expressions. You seem very angry about this. Of course I'm angry. Marcus destroyed lives for his own amusement. He took the tools meant to heal trauma and used them to create it. Did Marcus ever target you personally? Adrian hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but Sophia caught it. What do you mean? I mean, did he ever try to manipulate you the way he manipulated others? The psychiatrist's professional composure slipped slightly. Marcus tried many things. He was particularly interested in my divorce proceedings last year. Somehow he'd learned about my custody battle and would make casual references to. Torres looked up from his notes. What kind of references? Comments about how children of divorce adapt better when they have stability. Suggestions about parenting technique. Nothing overt, but enough to let me know he was trying to get inside my head. Sophia pressed further. How did you respond to these attempts? I recognized them for what they were, psychological manipulation tactics. Unlike his other victims, I understood his methods well enough to resist them. Adrian's voice carried a note of pride that seemed out of place. Where were you between midnight and 3 a.m. the night Marcus died? At home, reading. I live alone since the divorce. Anyone who can verify that? I'm afraid not. I value my solitude. After Adrian left, Sophia and Torres reviewed their growing list of suspects and motives. Each interview revealed new layers of Marcus's manipulation net, but also raised more questions about who could have outsmarted him. What's bothering me, Sophia said, staring at the evidence board, is that all these people had motive to kill Marcus, but none of them seem capable of the level of sophistication we saw at the crime scene. Torres nodded. Benjamin Park is too emotionally unstable right now to plan something this elaborate, and Dr. Cross, despite his professional knowledge, doesn't strike me as someone who could physically overpower Marcus. Plus, there's still the question of that fiber we found, Sophia. It's from a very specific type of surgical glove, not the standard latex ones most people would use. This suggests medical or forensic knowledge. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Detective Martinez entered with a concerned expression. Sophia, I've got something you need to see. We just received Marcus Whitfield's phone record. She handed Sophia a printout that made the forensic analyst's blood run cold. Look at his last call. Sophia scanned the document and found the entry that had alarmed Martinez. Marcus's final phone call had been made at 11:47 p.m. the night he died. The number belonged to the Henderson Police Department's crime lab. He had called Sophia's direct line. But I never received this call, Sophia said, her mind racing. I was home asleep. It went straight to voicemail. Torres looked at the evidence with new understanding. Sophia, what if Marcus knew he was going to die? What if he was trying to reach you specifically because he knew you'd be the one to investigate his murder? The realization hit her like a physical blow. Marcus Whitfield hadn't just been murdered. He'd orchestrated his own investigation, manipulating events even from beyond the grave to ensure Sophia would be the one to uncover the truth. But if Marcus had known his killer was coming, why hadn't he defended himself? And more importantly, what message had he tried to leave in that final, unanswered phone call? Sophia Hartwell stared at her office phone as if it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of will. The voicemail light blinked steadily, taunting her with the knowledge that Marcus Whitfield's final words were waiting just a button, press away. But before listening to what might be a dead man's confession, she needed to understand the physical evidence that had been nagging at her since the crime scene. The fiber she'd collected from Marcus's suite lay under her high-powered microscope, magnified to reveal its distinctive weave pattern. After running it through the FBI's textile database, the results confirmed her suspicions. It was from a nitrile surgical glove, specifically the Kimberly-Clark purple nitrile, variety used almost exclusively in high-end medical facilities and forensic laboratories. Torres, come look at this, she called to her partner, who was reviewing security footage from the Bellagio's hallway. Detective Torres approached the microscope. What am I looking at? This isn't just any surgical. These are expensive, specialized gloves used by forensic pathologists and crime scene investigators. They're purple-tinted to reduce eye strain during long procedures and have a distinctive texture pattern. Sophia pulled up the manufacturer's specifications on her computer. Only 3 facilities in Las Vegas regularly use these gloves: University Medical Center's pathology department, the Clark County Coroner's Office, and our own crime lab. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. You're saying the killer has access to forensic supplies. More than that, the killer understands crime scene contamination protocols well enough to wear gloves that wouldn't normally leave trace evidence, but made the mistake of choosing a type so specialized it actually narrows our suspect pool. Torres rubbed his temples. So we're looking for someone in law enforcement, medical examination, or forensic science? Sophia nodded grimly. Someone who would know exactly how to stage a convincing suicide. Someone who understands blood spatter pattern, ballistics trajectories, and evidence collection. Her phone rang, interrupting their analysis. Detective Martinez's voice carried urgency. Sophia, you need to get down here. We found Marcus's secret files. They hurried to the evidence storage room, where Martinez had spread dozens of files across examination tables. Each folder contained detailed psychological profiles, but these weren't traditional patient files. They were manipulation blueprints. Look at this organization, Martinez said, pointing to the systematic categorization. Marcus divided his targets into categories: financial leverage, emotional dependency, authority figures, and professional assets. Sophia picked up a file labeled Professional Assets and felt her stomach drop. Inside were detailed profiles of law enforcement officials, medical examiners, and forensic specialists throughout Nevada. Each profile contained personal information that should have been impossible for a civilian to obtain: family detail, financial struggle, career ambitions, and psychological vulnerability. He was building a network of controlled professionals, she whispered, people who could provide him with information, access, or protection if needed. Torres opened another file from the same category. Listen to this. Detective James Morrison, Las Vegas Metro. Subject shows classic signs of imposter syndrome despite excellent performance record. Divorced father of 2, struggling with child support payments. Recommendation: appeal to his need for professional validation while subtly undermining his confidence through comparison to more successful colleagues. He was profiling cops, Sophia said, her voice barely controlled. Studying us like lab rats. Martinez pulled out another file that made Sophia's blood freeze. Her own name was written across the tab in Marcus's precise handwriting. With trembling hands, Sophia opened her file. Inside was a psychological profile more detailed and accurate than anything she'd ever seen, including observations about her career motivations, her relationship pattern, and her investigative methods. But most disturbing was a note clipped to the inside cover. SH represents the greatest potential asset and the greatest potential threat. Her analytical capabilities make her invaluable for complex evidence manipulation, but her ethical rigidity makes traditional leverage approaches ineffective. Recommend isolation protocols if direct recruitment fails. Isolation protocols. Torres read over her shoulder. Sophia's mind raced through the implications. He was studying me as a potential recruit, but when he realized he couldn't control me, he developed contingency plans. She flipped through more pages in her file, finding surveillance photos of her daily routines, notes about her coffee preferences, even observations about her parking habits. Marcus had been stalking her professionally for months, possibly years. But why keep such detailed record? Martinez asked. This seems incredibly risky. Because Marcus was planning something bigger, Sophia realized. These aren't just manipulation guides, they're insurance policy. He was documenting his methods in case he needed to expose or blackmail his contact. Torres pointed to a red folder marked Contingency Protocol. Inside were step-by-step instructions for exposing the entire network if Marcus ever felt threatened. The plans were ruthlessly detailed, showing how to release information that would destroy careers, families, and lives across Nevada's law enforcement and medical communities. This is why he was killed, Sophia said, with growing certainty. Someone in his network discovered he was planning to expose them. She turned to the final section of Marcus's files and found what she'd been looking for, a detailed timeline of events leading up to his death. Marcus had been planning his exit strategy for weeks, carefully documenting threats he'd received and suspicious behavior from his contacts. The final entry, dated the day before his death, sent chills down Sophia's spine. AC has discovered the contingency file. Standard manipulation protocols no longer effective. Subject shows signs of advanced psychological training and appears to be using my own methods against me. If this entry is found, AC should be considered extremely dangerous. Have initiated final protocol. SH will understand the significance. AC, Torres said. Adrian Cross. Sophia shook her head slowly. Adrian isn't just our suspect anymore. According to this, he's been engaged in a psychological war with Marcus for weeks, and he's been winning. The realization hit her that they weren't just hunting a killer. They were tracking someone who had successfully turned Marcus's own manipulation techniques against him, someone skilled enough in psychological warfare to outmaneuver a master manipulator. We need to listen to that voicemail, Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear growing inside her. Marcus called me for a reason, and I think he knew he was going to die. As they prepared to return to Sophia's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a game where the rules had been written by a dead man, and the final move was still waiting to be revealed. But one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. Whoever had killed Marcus Whitfield was still out there, and they had been watching Sophia's investigation from the very beginning. Now, using techniques I taught him years ago when we were colleagues, he's turned my own methods against me with surgical precision. Torres and Martinez exchanged glances as Marcus's voice continued, each word carefully chosen and delivered with the clinical detachment of a man documenting his own demise. Adrian discovered my contingency files last month. Instead of confronting me directly, he began a campaign of psychological manipulation, designed to isolate me from my network and drive me towards self-destruction. He's been feeding information to my contact, turning them against me, making me appear unstable and dangerous. Sophia felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The scared expressions of Helena Vasquez and Benjamin Park hadn't just been fear of Marcus. They'd been warned about him, poisoned against him by someone they trusted more. But here's what Adrian doesn't understand. Marcus's voice took on a note of satisfaction. I've been documenting his methods just as thoroughly as he's been using them. The evidence you need is hidden in my office safe. Combination 0724, my daughter's birthday. Inside, you'll find recordings of our conversations and proof of how he's been manipulating my other contacts. The voicemail paused, and they could hear Marcus moving around in the background. When his voice returned, it carried a note of resigned admiration. Adrian is brilliant, Sophia. He's using a technique called progressive psychological isolation, gradually turning someone's support network against them, while positioning himself as the only trustworthy source of guidance. It's elegant, effective, and nearly impossible to prove, but he made one critical error. Sophia leaned forward, hanging on every word. He underestimated my ego. Adrian assumed I'd never document my own manipulation, but I've been recording everything. My death isn't random timing. Adrian has been systematically increasing psychological pressure, knowing I'd eventually reach a breaking point. What he doesn't know is that I chose tonight specifically because I knew you'd be the one to investigate. The recording crackled with static as Marcus seemed to move closer to the phone. Sophia, Adrian will try to appear helpful during your investigation. He'll offer insights into my psychology, validate your suspicions about my manipulation network, and position himself as a concerned colleague. Don't trust him. Everything he tells you will be designed to reinforce the narrative he wants you to believe. Torres was already on his phone, calling for a warrant to search Marcus's office. Martinez frantically took notes as the voicemail continued. The purple nitrile fiber you'll find at the scene came from gloves Adrian stole from the coroner's office 3 months ago. He's been planning this for longer than even I realized. The cleaning solution traces are from a specific medical-grade disinfectant that only Adrian has access to through his hospital consulting work. Sophia's mind raced as Marcus laid out a perfect forensic roadmap to his own murder. But here's the final piece, Sophia, the one that will prove everything. Adrian believes he's been manipulating me into suicide, but I've been documenting his techniques to use against him. In my safe, you'll find a complete psychological profile of Adrian Cross, including evidence of 3 previous suicides he orchestrated using identical methods. The voicemail fell silent for a long moment before Marcus's voice returned, softer now, almost vulnerable. I know what I am, Sophia. I know the damage I've caused. But Adrian is worse than me because he believes his motives are pure. He thinks he's cleaning up psychology by eliminating practitioners he deems unethical. He's not just a killer, he's a crusader, and that makes him far more dangerous. The message ended with the sound of a door closing and footsteps approaching, Adrian arriving for their final confrontation. Within 2 hours, they had the warrant and were breaking into Marcus's office safe. Inside, exactly as promised, were recordings of conversations between Marcus and Adrian spanning 3 months. The audio revealed a masterclass in psychological manipulation, as Adrian systematically destroyed Marcus's confidence, isolated him from his network, and drove him toward increasingly desperate behavior. But the most damning evidence was a thick file labeled the Cleanser Project, Adrian's documented plan to eliminate what he called rogue psychologists throughout Nevada. Marcus had been the fourth target, following 3 other deaths that had been ruled suicides. "Listen to this," Sophia said, playing one of the recorded conversations. Adrian's voice was barely recognizable, warm and supportive as he spoke to Marcus about his ethical struggles. "Marcus, you have to understand that your methods, while unorthodox, come from a place of wanting to help people. But the guilt you're feeling shows you're still capable of redemption." Marcus's voice responded, clearly under emotional stress. "I can't sleep, Adrian. Every time I close my eyes, I see the people I've hurt." That's your conscience reasserting itself. It's actually a positive sign. But Marcus, you need to consider whether continuing to practice is fair to potential future clients. Sophia paused the recording. "He's literally talking Marcus into believing suicide is an ethical choice." Torres shook his head in disgust. "How long has this been going on?" "According to these dates, Adrian has been orchestrating psychologist suicides for 2 years, Martinez reported, reviewing the case file. "He targets practitioners with ethical violations, befriends them, then uses therapy techniques to drive them to self-destruction." Sophia found herself admiring Marcus's final gambit despite everything. Marcus figured out what Adrian was doing and decided to beat him at his own game. He let Adrian think the manipulation was working while secretly gathering evidence. The arrest warrant was issued that evening. Dr. Adrian Cross was taken into custody at his home, where they found detailed psychological profiles of 6 more potential targets, including 2 judges and a district attorney who had been lenient in cases involving unethical medical practitioners. But as Sophia reviewed the case files later that night, she discovered Marcus's final twist, a sealed envelope addressed to her personally, hidden behind his other documents. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Marcus's handwriting. "Sophia, if you're reading this, you've successfully solved my murder and exposed Adrian's network. But remember, I chose you for this investigation because I knew you'd see the truth others would miss. The real question you should be asking yourself is, how did I know you'd be assigned to this case? The answer might disturb you more than anything else you've discovered." Sophia stared at the note, her blood growing cold as the implications sank in. Marcus hadn't just predicted his death and planned his investigation. He'd somehow ensured she would be the responding crime scene analyst. As she sat in her office, surrounded by evidence of the most complex psychological manipulation case she'd ever encountered, Sophia realized that even in death, Marcus Whitfield was still playing games with her mind. And somewhere in the depths of his final manipulation, she suspected there were still secrets waiting to be uncovered.